Good afternoon, my friends. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so it can be with you forever. So, I'm going to talk about a subject here that is very controversial to a lot of people, and a lot of people take it very personally. And this is the subject of what real music is. And real music is a concept that a lot of people attribute to genres and styles. Most specifically, it's either hip hop from the 90s specifically or rock music from the 60s or 70s. And those are basically the two leading dominant factors of stylistic conventions that are attributed to real music, specifically because there was a cultural incentive at that time. And there is this notion that real music doesn't really exist today. And I'm going to talk about that because it's both wrong and true, because the main difference really is that with rock and hip hop, and you can include jazz also at one point, the reason why people attributed to it being real was because there was a cultural element to it that people sort of gravitated towards. And this is the thing that music encapsulates, is culture. Music is culture. Music is a spiritual device to connect people. If we all speak the musical language, we all understand the musical language, then we can communicate with each other on that way. And that's kind of one of the things when we have even like spoken language, we find ourselves having a very difficult time connecting with each other, right? We have a very difficult time because everyone has different languages. Everyone speaks English or French or Spanish or Russian or Chinese or Japanese, Portuguese, whatever. And there's so many variants of those languages within them. There's slang, there's different interpretations of different words. You have things like capitalism and communism, which lead people into hours and hours of argumentation just of what those words even mean. You can extrapolate language indefinitely, and there's always going to be an aspect of it that's missing and not really able to connect with everyone. And unfortunately, music today is in that same kind of category. Everyone is kind of split off into little camps of isolated genres and genre tropes. You have people who fixate on specific genres and fixate on specific styles. And the main one now is obviously trap music, which is a fixation on a lot of materialism. And I can go on in and on about this for hours. But when you have people that just fixate on these genres and styles, you see them incorporate the culture that comes with it. And you need to be mindful, I guess, of what you're constantly consuming. I don't think listening to a specific song every once in a while, if it has like bad lyrics or whatever, it's demonic or something, is going to do much harm for you. I'm more specifically talking about the culture that you're ingesting. But when we're talking about real music, we're going to go back to that and why people sort of attribute, let's say, 90s hip-hop to being real hip-hop versus trap music today, which is fake hip-hop, I guess. Or you have 70s rock, and then you have fake rock, I guess, that came afterwards with like glam metal in the 80s and, all these industry plant bands. And, when we talk about real music was better then, what we're really talking about is the cultural incentive, the artists that were expressing a sense of their self, honestly, truthfully. And that's what real music is. It's music that's truthful. It's speaking from the soul to other people in a way that's honest and that people can gravitate and connect with. And that's ultimately all real music is. It doesn't mean that everyone has to connect with it. Not everyone understands certain art. Some people are disconnected from it. Some artists purposefully make the art harder to connect with which I don't really relate with personally. I don't really see a reason to do that as an artist. But if you're an artist who believes in making your, art very seclusive and isolated from other people, feel free to do that. But there was the time in the 70s and in the 90s where you had artists making music that was a true expression of themselves. And it wasn't because they utilized certain sounds or they had woke political messages in their lyrics, or, they used complex chords and, all kinds of chromatic scales that make it explicitly, complicated. That doesn't necessarily make it real music. What's real is the person making it. When you look at someone like Bob Dylan, or you look at someone like Tupac, Biggie, or you go back even further in jazz, look at Miles Davis, look at Lenny Tristano, look at all these other, it could go on. There's plenty of amazing artists that express themselves truthfully, honestly, from the soul, blah, 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 blah. And that was the encapsulation of real music. And those people still exist today. Those kinds of artists are around. They're just not publicized. There's no market for artists like this because people aren't connected into music on a spiritual level anymore. There's no connection to it that's beyond just, entertainment. And it's always kind of been like that. But it's gotten accelerated, I would say. And I'm talking specifically from a mainstream perspective. And I think that's why you have these people saying, oh, this is when real music was back in the day. There's two factors into why they feel like that. One is nostalgia. So already that's kind of bullshit. You can't just equate realness with your own personal memories of a specific time period. There's plenty of music from the 2000s that I feel nostalgic for and I enjoy, but I recognize it's kind of bullshit music. It's not exactly like groundbreaking or spiritually uplifting. It's just something from when I was a kid I used to listen to and I enjoyed it, and it was a good song. It had a good beat. And the aspect though of like real music, if you want to go into it, there was a time where that was more marketable. The people, the cream of the crop rose to the top of the music industry because people connected and resonated with that. The problem is that because there's so much fixation on genre and style that people have, whether that's due to nostalgia factors or just, this acceleration of music consumption. There's so many different genres and styles, and people can fixate on genres because they get used to it, they develop a taste for it, an appetite, and that's the only thing they can listen to. And all of a sudden, the concept of the real artist, the real musician, sort of fades away because people are fixated on, aspects of music that aren't really the main point of music, which is connecting people. And so they feel connected to a specific style, and that style is what they represent as themselves. And a lot of people are like this. A lot of people who claim to love music are often just fixated on a specific style or genre. A lot of people who think rock music is real music compared to everything else, they just have a fetish for rock music. They don't actually love music. They don't actually care about good music. They don't care about the true expression of an artist. They only care about fixating on their appetite for a specific sound. And this is one of those things that can differentiate between someone, I like to equate it with food a lot because music and food are very similar. They're both consumptive in the sense that you are consuming flavors, if you want to call it, because that's what music is. A lot of music styles and conventions are all different flavors that you can incorporate into a meal, so to speak, and the person ingests that. the difference is that food is fuel for your body, so to speak, and music is fuel for your soul or your consciousness. When you listen to music, you are incorporating the aspects of the culture that tie that music together, and you're ingesting it into yourself, and you in a sense become that music genre, you become that style. So when people fixate on things like rock music, like look at the baby boomer generation that's completely fixated on it because they grew up in a time where that was all they listened to. Because this is one of the main things, is that the music industry at that point was very centralized. You only really listened to what was on the radio or what was in the local record shop, and usually it was just kind of rock music. And then you had jazz music, which they considered was for old people, which is a completely different problem altogether, which is kind of being reversed nowadays. We see a lot of kids idolizing older music rather than being attracted to newer music, and this is particularly because of mainstream music nowadays. Because music is so accessible, people don't really have a reason to just follow the mainstream, so to speak. So if someone has a modicum of self-reflection and discovery and wanting to find good music, they'll venture out other places, or they'll listen to older music because that was when real music was around or whatever. And then you have what's the mainstream pop industry, which has become very watered down. Although there's some like vague improvements in other people. I'm not going to mention names. I don't think there's a reason to do that. But, the pop industry has become very centralized as well in recent years because it's fixating towards a specific demographic now, because the people who are venturing out to try to find the newest and best music are actually going to the past. They're actually looking backwards. They're looking to the 60s and 70s. That's why you have all these hipsters and artists who aren't, that was like the weird thing that's changed a lot. The hipsters and artists back in the day, and if you go back to 1940s, they were looking towards the future in a way, or they were looking towards the present, trying to encapsulate the moment in their respective time, or trying to innovate in a way that was pushing towards the future. The difference now, though, is that hipsters are going back to the past. They're trying to retrace the steps along the way that we might have looked over. And I think this is an important process in history, especially when we're talking about music. And what real music is that we're trying to retrace our steps, because we've been chasing this concept of music as being this consistently evolving thing. We have to find the new style, the newest genre, the newest sound. What's the new sound? And a lot of us have become jaded because we've kind of hit a peak of what the new sound could possibly be. And now people are looking backwards, because if you've never heard it before, it's new to you. So you go backwards in time and you can find something that's a lot more intricate and complex. You can find artists that are a lot more self-expressive in the past. And people get tricked by this. They'll look back in the past and they'll find something beautiful, and they'll attribute it to the style of that genre. They won't attribute it to the artist, the individual who made it. They'll attribute it to, oh, this is rock music, so this rock music must be real music. Oh, this is 90s hip-hop, Tupac, that's so deep, that's great. It's like this 90s era of hip-hop was so much better than now. And the problem with that is that you're seeing an aspect of what real music is in a way that's just illusory, because real music is everywhere. It doesn't matter what style or genre it is. It can be found in any style. And when people fixate on genres, they fixate on something that isn't real. They fixate on a style, something that's transitory, something that's going to change anyway. And that's kind of where we're at with this postmodernist idea that people are becoming more and more hive-minded into, and people are becoming more segregated than ever, musically speaking. And the only way you can really have the same kind of unity is to recognize good music for what it is. And there's going to be people out there, music theory nerds who talk about music like music can be anything. Anything can be music. Anything can be good music. It's all about the perspective and the subjective opinion of what your music is. And, that's all good and true. Any music could be theoretically good. But there is also the aspect of the cultural connotation to music. What's the music that you want your culture to be reflected by? And if we look at real music back in the day, let's look at jazz music, for instance. And people often like to equate jazz with trap music nowadays. I'm not really sure why, because trap music has a lot of drug references and blah, 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 blah. People will equate, well, yeah, jazz music had the same thing. Everyone was talking about getting drunk and fucking bitches and all this other stuff. But people also forget that jazz music was also largely influenced by the church, by choirs, by gospel singers, which, isn't really in trap music. That spiritual connotation to things isn't there. Maybe in some tracks, I don't know. I don't really pay much attention anymore, I'm going to be honest. Just because it's not, I just don't care about styles anymore. I don't care about genres. If I hear a song and I like it, that's pretty much it. But there are definitely genres that are just cultural psyops in a way. I'm not going to say if it's like, from a third party entity or some evil lizard people. When I say psyop, I just mean people ingesting on a massive scale, exclusively consuming it and consuming an aspect of culture that is detrimental to their own well-being. And I have a problem with that. And jazz never really had that. It was honest in the sense that it was, there was all kinds of drug references in the music and sexual connotations to jazz music. But ultimately what made jazz stand out was the spiritual aspect that came with it as well, because it was a holistic genre. It encapsulated everything. That's what being human is. You can't just fixate on one aspect of thing. That's why, in the church in the Middle Ages, music was kind of really dull and boring at that time, because it was so fixated on being perfectly harmonious and perfectly balanced that there wasn't any room to express oneself. And then jazz opened that up completely. But then you have people now that everything's open, they're fixating into compartments of styles and lifestyles that often can be detrimental. And that's one of the things that you have to be careful, and why when we talk about real music, and if you're especially a person who loves music, is to accept and try to listen to as much music as you can, because it's easy nowadays in this world where there's just so much music available. It's easy to get trapped in a specific style and not really branch out. And I know so many people who claim to love music, but really they only love one type. And if you're that kind of person, you're living a very one-dimensional life culturally. You're not expanding culturally. You're not expanding your soul and yourself to understand, especially humanity, on a deeper scale, because I truly believe music brings people together. And if you listen to different kinds of music, you are connecting to those different kinds of people. And if we live in a world that's so disconnected and we want to have people reconnected somehow, we need to reconnect on a level that goes beyond just, this is my little micro genre, this is my little community. That's it. And that's what a lot of people are, especially as someone like me who is a musician who tries to create music that's holistic. I don't make music under any genre. I sometimes use genres for like tagging as like marketing purposes. I used hard vapor. I invented that as a way to basically open up genre completely and to have a tag to it as well, because there's no such thing as a stylistic trope for me. I make music however the fuck I want to make it, because that's what I believe in. I believe in making music. I believe in making good music as a whole. I don't believe in making something fixated on a genre, because I don't think it's, especially in this era, that's not useful. You're not helping anyone by fixating on a genre, by saying this is the only style I make, this is the only thing I do. Because this is why I've gotten into jazz, because jazz isn't even a real genre. I'm going to say it right now. What jazz was a moment in history where first of all, the music industry just began recording. That was basically the launch of the recording industry, and there was just a bunch of people improvising and doing all kinds of shit, whatever they wanted to do. Didn't matter if you're black or white or purple or whatever. You were just making your own thing, and black people were the ones who significantly started this. They were the initiators of this way, because they had no reason to fit into a conformed society, because they were outcasted. You have to sort of see this from a racial perspective, because at that time, especially in America, it's impossible to not bring it up. And the thing about why jazz is so innovative and so unique, and why there is just so much development and so much diversity that just came from that style, because it's not like just rock music. Rock music is just a fixation on the electric guitar and playing basic ass chords and some guy singing. That's really all rock music is. Jazz, it was so much and so expansive, specifically because of why black people were outcasted, why they didn't conform, they didn't fit into society. Because at that time, if you think about what white culture was a very rigidified culture that you had to be a part of. You had to meld into this, and these were people that couldn't. They were not allowed to, so they were like, fuck it, what do we do? How do we express ourselves? What's our culture? What's our music? And they invented it, right? They had to. They had no choice. And this is why you also see, even amongst white musicians, why there are some white musicians that entered it. It's no surprise that a lot of them were Jewish or Italian, or some other minority of people that were outcasted. Even if they were just some, let's say Bix Beiderbecke, who was a white trumpeter from the 20s. He grew up in a very affluent white neighborhood, waspy neighborhood, but he didn't fit into his family. His family outcasted him because he loved jazz music, and he had to become his own self. He couldn't fit into this society he was born into. He was outcasted and made his own thing. And I think that's why that's something that needs to come back, and that's something that's lost. And it's not a style. It's not, because people play music with a saxophone and they play these specific chord progressions, which is what jazz has become now. It's become this rigidified, commodified thing that you study in music school, and this is what jazz is. You have to learn what jazz is, jazz theory, jazz history, and that's all great and fun if you want to learn music. It's great to learn from everyone what musical innovations, what musical concepts were created at various points in history. It's important to learn that stuff. But ultimately, what they're doing is they're expressing themselves truthfully, honestly. And there were a lot of people at that time who were just copycats, just copying them. And that was what became a genre. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, all these genres are these individuals making music and then people copying them. And then they copy them enough times, and then it becomes a genre. And then people just fixate into that genre. It becomes this never-ending cycle. It's a feedback loop of things real artists created uniquely and then other people copied. And so when we're heading into this era of music where there's just an infinite supply, so to speak, there's infinite genres, there's literally no possibility to have a new genre. And this is why trap music is the predominant force, because it's like that ketchup, it's like that chocolate syrup that gets people going. It's familiar, they know what it sounds like, and there's nothing really left to do. And it's just, think of the word, it's a trap. Don't get trapped. If you want to be someone who understands the world, who wants to stop the world from being so disconnected in a way, the way to do that is not to fixate on a genre, to not say 70s music was the best genre. 70s funk is just what I listen to, man. Like 90s grunge, man. Like, oh man, like 60s, like underground garage rock. That's just all I listen. Like, just forget about that shit. Just, it's enough. Like, move on. And see music holistically. Because all music can be great. It doesn't really matter. And don't be one of those cynics who see all music as bullshit and think, well, anything can be art, and then they just bang on a fucking piano and call that music. No, there's a craft to it. There's an aspect of it that you learn and you understand, and you pay respect to the people that came before you that have built music for thousands of years. It's an evolutionary process. You know, you think of someone like John Coltrane, he wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for all the people before him. And I'm not just talking about jazz artists like we start from Louis Armstrong and go there. It goes on before that, because these artists, Charlie Parker, Louis Armstrong, even though they were innovators, they were black innovators creating jazz, they were all influenced by white musicians also. They were influenced by Mozart and Beethoven, Rachmaninoff. They all listened to these guys. And those guys listened to the people before them, and so on and so forth. Or they listen to African tribal music, and you can keep going backwards like that, which is what a lot of people have been doing. You look at someone like Paul Simon, who became fetishized with African drumming, and a lot of jazz musicians becoming fetishized with African drummings and African rhythms, and they retreat backwards, which is good. It's good to trace your steps back, but then you have to move forward as well. You have to move with your own tune, your own melody. And this is something that's also prevalent in Indian music. You know, you don't learn music in a specific way. This is how you play music. You learn from a master, and then you learn the basics and you learn the structure, but then you break out and then you create your own music, right? And that's what improvisation is. That's why jazz was so important, because it brought improvisation into the mix. It brought into the sense of what are you going to make? What are you going to make on the spot? Make some music right now. Not something someone else made. It's your own thing, right? And that's very difficult for a lot of people. I know a lot of musicians, like even in piano, like classically trained pianists who walk up to a piano and they can play a Chopin tune perfectly. They're amazing. Then you ask them to improvise, and they're like, I can't, they can't do it, right? Because they're fixated only on replicating, right? And this is what producers do a lot nowadays. They replicate other styles. They don't know how to actually create anything from themselves. And, this isn't about being original, so to speak. It's about being creative, because ultimately it's impossible to be truly original, because we're taking influences from every which way or genre. And that's why being a musician, it's important to listen to as many genres as possible, so you can take as many influences, and then you can work with it like a chef. You can cook, you can use different spices, use different things to create what you want to create, what you think is a representation of yourself, of your soul. And then if it's a beautiful soul that you're creating, other people can consume that, and they become a part of it. They become connected into that. And that's what a gift is as a musician, that you give to people. If you have something to give, if you don't have anything to give, if you're just one of those people that bangs their shoe against a wall and records it, and then takes a piece of metal and scrapes it on a wall, that's what your soul is. I mean, cool. It's not going to help anyone. It's not going to help anyone get through their day when they're driving on the freeway, hating their life. They want to kill themselves because they've been working the same job for 20 years and they have to pay their rent and their mortgage or whatever, and they're on the verge of homelessness, and they turn on that song, and it's this beautiful melody, this beautiful harmony that's put together by someone, and it gets them through the day, and it gets them to, maybe to cry a little bit or to laugh or something, to make them feel something that's deeper than just, some generic trap beat that someone made specifically just for money, or some guy wanting to prove to himself how, technically skilled he is at a specific instrument to prove to people, look how good I am, look how amazing I am at music. No one cares. No one cares how good you are. No one cares how skilled you are. Or if you're someone who just makes noise shit because you think anything can be art and you're just obsessed with chaos. You know, what's the use of that? What are you giving to people? What are you creating that's of value to anyone? You're not doing anything. And I take it personally because I take what I do seriously. I don't just make music as an ego thing, as something to prove to other people. You know, when I say I listen to my own music, I don't say that from a standpoint of ego, like, oh my God, I'm so amazing. I make it because I genuinely want to make good music that I enjoy and other people can enjoy too. And that's why I make so much diverse music, because everyone's trapped in these different styles and tastes. And I recognize that. I recognize people have fixations on specific styles. And I think if I want to make something that's in service to people and make money from it also, I'm not a fucking communist. I'm not going to just say that I'm going to do this for free. I'd like to be paid for it. I'll do it anyway. But if I appreciate money anyway, but regardless, it's another thing. But I'll do this anyway for the sake of creating as much diversity in my music as possible, because I want to give something to people that's beyond what their stylistic conventions are, what their stylistic tastes are. I want to give them something that anyone can have, that branches off to everyone. And that's really all I have to say about that. I don't really have much else in what real music means. And real music is transcendent from any genre. And if you're someone who fixates on genres, then you have to really think about why you're fixating on something. Why do you think 70s rock music is so much better than everything else? What is it about it objectively? You know, there really isn't. And it's the same thing with myself, because I listen to a lot of jazz swing bands from the 30s. What was so objectively better about that music than anything today? Not really much, but the difference was I was listening to stuff that had real musicians, and all I had to do was go to today's world and find the real musicians, because they weren't as popularized, they weren't pushed out into the mainstream. And when I did find them, that was when I realized that all this obsession with style and genre and what's a real genre and what's a fake genre is complete nonsense. And I'll talk about country music. A lot of it's bullshit nowadays, and everyone's aware of that. A lot of it is, just copying formulas from the past in a very rigidified, commodified way. So they sell a product to people, because people can't really tell the difference. They don't really know what they're consuming, because a lot of people don't really listen to music with an emotional response a lot. They just listen to it because it exists and it's what they're familiar with, and they just want to have a good time. Not even a good time. They just want to have something in the background to get through life. But then you listen to real country music, right? The music from the soul, the spiritual aspect of music, the thing that's connecting their soul to other people, and that, like Johnny Cash, Slim Whitman, Hank Williams, Townes Van Zandt. These are all great country musicians that brought something of themselves, and there's a reason it doesn't exist today, because that sound has just turned into a formula, a factory formula you can reproduce with any kind of singer you could pop up. This is what I learned. If a singer gets a songwriting credit, right, the only thing they have to do to get a songwriting credit is be in the room with the songwriter writing the music for them. And this happens a lot in the industry. The songwriter, who is ultimately someone behind the scenes, and they make a lot of great music as well, but they're behind the scenes. They write out the tune. The songwriter's just sitting there, or not the songwriter, their singer is just sitting there, and they get a credit for that. So it's just something to think about when you listen to a lot of these singer-songwriters. They're not often the songwriter, so just another thing to think about, I guess. But anyway, that's kind of deviant from what I'm talking about. But I'll end it here. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can be with you forever. Peace.